All right. What I want you to do, starting out, Malachi, you all by yourself? Yeah. Where's Ezra? All right, he's coming back. Okay. The conversation I want you to start with this morning, we talked about our weapon systems. Do you remember what our weapon systems are? Yeah. What's the Pioneer's weapon system? Grenade launcher, that's right. What is the Connector's weapon system? Cyber warfare, right. Creative thinker? Sniper rifle. Creative feeler?
Hulk.
The Incredible Hulk, that's right. What is the Guardian? Interrogation. And the Nurturer? Withholding care. Yes, you guys are doing great. Love it. All right, what I want you to think through and have a conversation as a group, and maybe somebody could record some of these. What are the triggers that tend to trigger your weapon system? So when you kind of feel that weapon system coming out, what are some of the things that trigger that weapon system for you as a voice? Talk about that for a few minutes. Love it, dude. Well done. All right, take one more minute to wrap up. All right, let's find our way back to our seats. Yeah, back to your seats. Naturally, our connectors are having a hard time leaving their space because that's why you guys are connectors. Is this somebody's special?
Yep, right there.
Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely. But it's not that you can have extroverts and introverts in either category, which sometimes gets people confused because you can be an extroverted nurturer, and typically a lot of nurturers are a little bit quieter, but then there's extrovert, and sometimes they're like, well, am I really a nurturer because I'm kind of more extroverted? Doesn't necessarily mean you're extroverted and introvert is where you get your energy. So introverts get their energy by being alone, they need rest. Extroverts get their energy by being with people. So it's really more where you get your energy from than your personality of like a five voice kind of personality kind of thing. So you can find them both. I'm going to pray really quick just as we get started, as I get started talking about this stuff. So let's just pray together. Lord Jesus, I just feel honored to get to be here, and I'm feeling, as you know, some sadness that this is the last morning that I'm going to be teaching and getting to spend time talking about things that I know that you have really pressed on my heart. But I pray that you would press these things on all of our hearts because you have called us to love you well, because you are our creator and you've made us to be in relationship. And so I pray that we would learn to love our neighbor. I pray that we would learn to actually respect and love ourselves in the image that you created us to be in. Not a love that's turned in on ourselves, but a love that looks outward, and that we would use that in order to love the people that you have put in our lives. I pray this in your name. Amen. All right. Pioneers, I want to hear from you. What are some of the triggers that you came up with that kind of can trigger your weapon system? Yep, absolutely. Totally true for Pioneer. Any others?
I mean, I'm the only other pioneer, so so I just say like, yeah, if we have a plan and somebody tries to critique things or change things, and if the plan will work, but it just might work more efficient if they add things.
Yep.
I just would rather go with the thing that already works instead of trying to make it better.
Yep. Good. Good. All right, pioneers. This is typically the triggers that trigger pioneers. Perceived incompetence in others. So if someone's trying to lead, you know you could lead, and someone's trying to take leadership and you perceive that they're incompetent to do so, that can often trigger a pioneer where it feels like there's a little bit of competition. Someone else is trying to take leadership and you're like, they're not competent to lead. That can trigger a pioneer. You guys agree with that? You felt that ever? People challenging your competence. So someone challenges you on your ability to do something that you know you've thought through, you know that you can do it well, and someone's challenging you whether they think you can do it or not. That can really trigger a pioneer. People threatening your vision. So exactly what you guys said. We have a plan. We know where we're going, and somebody is threatening the plan. Someone is threatening where we're trying to go. And we've already really thought through this. We really have created a plan, and someone else is trying to hijack it. That's when the comes out. And then time wasting can trigger pioneers. So a lot of pioneers, if it feels like, hey, we got to get moving, and we're just wasting time, that can sometimes trigger pioneers. You'll see this a lot of times in people that lead organizations, people that lead churches. It's like, we've got stuff to do, and everybody's screwing around. Like, we got to get stuff done. That can kind of trigger sometimes the pioneer. You guys resonate with those things? All right, good. All right, connectors, what did you come up with? What triggers your voice or your weapon system? Yep.
I say when like we help with a big project and then somebody else gets recognized for it, we feel like we did all the work.
Yep.
Wow.
Yep.
It's
Hurts a lot. That's why the weapon system comes out. And you start dropping little bits of poison and making everybody feel a little uncertain about whoever's trying to lead it, or making decisions, or actually the person that actually is hurting you the most is probably the person who's going to feel it the most. What else, connectors? What else you come up with?
Like when somebody shoots down your idea, or like it feels like they're shooting it down, but when they give like a different suggestion, then it's like, oh well, whatever. Like you hate me, it's fine. I'm gonna go cry.
100%. Anything else? Yeah. Cameron, I saw you up first.
Not being included in like everything.
Not being included in everything. You feel left out. You know, more is better, right? Like, we got to make the circle bigger. Yeah, if you feel left out, then that can be really, really frustrating and trigger a weapon system, especially if you know the person that's keeping you out. That person's going to feel it. What do you think, Maria? Is that the same thing? Yeah. Yep. Overlooked, rejected. That's right. Connectors, the triggers. People taking credit for your work. So like Colin said, that is really frustrating when you've worked really hard on a project, you feel like you've really added a lot to it, and then someone else takes the credit for it, whether it's you brought somebody in that actually was the game changer for how things happened, and nobody, again, recognizes. It was kind of that example I gave yesterday, like when we want to hear people say, we will always appreciate what you brought to the team, because we wouldn't be where we at if it wasn't for you. That's what we want to hear. It feels so good when people do that. If people take credit for our work, really frustrating, and that triggers us. People not recognizing the validity of your ideas. So you have an idea, you're trying to sell it because you're passionate for the team, you think it's the best thing, and then people don't think it's a valid one. That can really trigger connectors. You sense people aren't for you. So this is that being left outside. It's like, how come people don't want me to, everybody went to the beach and nobody even, like, I just went to the bathroom, nobody even waited for me. Like, people aren't for me. Like, what's going on? Like, why didn't people think about me? That can trigger a connector. People aren't willing to collaborate. This can be really hard for connectors. So sometimes because and this is a good, Zipporah asked this question about extrovert, introverts, because often connectors tend to be more extroverted. We see more extroversion in connectors, that sometimes they want everybody to participate. And as some of you know who are guardians, sometimes nurturers, you're like, I actually just work better when I'm in a small group, usually because my voice is more valued and heard in a smaller group. And so when connectors want everybody to participate, sometimes there's other voices that go, yeah, I know you want that, but what you really mean is you want more people to hear your stories, you want more people to hear your idea. And so sometimes people like to work in smaller groups, and that can really frustrate connectors because they want everyone to sort of collaborate, although sometimes we really just want more people in the room to hear our stories or to hear our vision. That makes sense? Connectors, do you agree with some of those things? You feel some of those? All right. What triggers the guardians? Yes. So good, Ireland. That's great. That you nailed them. Like all of those things, because guardians really deeply care for the movement of a community, and they really put thought into it, but it needs to be rational. It needs to make sense. And when that feels like that's being ignored or bowled over, again, let's all go to the island. You're like, well, I care about this community, and everybody's going to drown halfway there. Like, and people aren't being rational about it. It's really frustrating. That can trigger the guardian. First one, lack of trust in others' credibility. So when a guardian feels like somebody's trying to lead the people that they love and the community they love in the wrong direction, and they actually don't have the credibility to do it, that can trigger a guardian and going, I'm going to ask you tons of questions, and I'm going to make sure that everybody, like, nobody else is going to ask this, but I will, because I care about this community enough to ask that question, because I don't trust your credibility. Unnecessary risk-taking. So guardians really care about the details. They care about if you're in charge of a budget, you care about those things. The details are important. And so when there's unnecessary risk-taking with people you love, with an organization you work for, whatever it might be, that can really trigger a guardian when it feels like we're taking risk just for the sake of risk. And that's kind of stupid. Like, why would we do that? Unresponsive arrogance can be very, very frustrating for guardians. This is probably, honestly, one of the biggest ones. When someone is really arrogant and they're not willing to admit that they're just coming off too strong, they're not willing to take other people's perspectives in, they're not actually, they don't even want to know some of the details of what's important, that can really trigger a guardian. And then when illogical people appear incompetent. So what this means is guardians tend to be more logical. So when there's illogical people that aren't logical and they're actually incompetent with what they're saying, a guardian will step in for the sake of the group and say, I will be the logical one and ask the hard questions because nobody else is asking them. You're certainly not thinking about them. And so I'm going to come in and ask those questions. We're going to critique you and we're going to interrogate you until people realize, oh my goodness, like what Ireland just said might be right. Like what Abby said might be right. Like, have we thought through this well? Because I don't know that this person actually knows what they're talking about. They just have a really good story and they're charismatic and everybody seems to be following them. And so you're going to step in. And that's why we desperately need our guardians. Guardians are so important for community, for churches, for organizations, because it helps us make sure that we're actually taking care of the things that are important and we have some logic and reasons for the things that we're doing. All right, creative pioneer voice. Creative pioneer is the creative thinker. Yes?
So when people are incompetent, like when they say, oh, I can definitely do this, I can totally do this, and they don't follow through with it. And also when they immediately shoot down your idea, and then later on they're like, okay, anyone have ideas? And you're just like, I had one, but you shot it down.
Right.
Also when people are unable to pick up what you're throwing at them,
Yes.
the ideas, and only being known for that one idea that you had a while ago, and people are like, okay, cool idea, sick, other ideas.
Totally. Because you're going, wait a second, like you guys went right past what I just said and you didn't actually listen. Half the time, this is where as creatives, and I'm a creative second voice, so I feel a lot of this sometimes, is like, you didn't even try to flesh out what I was trying to say, and you didn't seek to truly understand me, and now I feel really frustrated because somebody threw out a worse idea and everybody's gonna go with it because you sold it really well. You stinking connector or whoever, like, whatever that might be. Incompetence and inefficiency. So, like you said, incompetence is frustrating for a creative if somebody is pretending to be competent, but they actually aren't. And they're inefficient in the way that they do it. Arrogance, again, for creatives. Arrogance is really hard because it's often the arrogant people that will push past your idea, they'll throw one out. And because people are either scared of that person or they're just more influential charismatically, people will follow them. That can really, really trigger a creative. People appearing to dismiss your ideas. So she talked about that. People dismissing your ideas. There's nothing, and this goes for both creatives, there's nothing more frustrating for a creative when they throw an idea out there and everybody's like, okay, yeah, well, we'll see. Yeah, maybe, I don't know. And it moves on. And then 2 weeks later, somebody else throws out the exact same idea and the creative's going, and everybody goes, oh my goodness, that is brilliant. That's a great idea. And the creative, I just said that 2 weeks ago. And they're like, we didn't hear you say that. And the creative's going, yes, that's exactly what I said. And I'm going, well, you didn't say it like that. I mean, that was, nice try, but, and it's like, oh my goodness, that, again, triggers you. Exaggeration of the truth. So if someone's exaggerating something, that can be really frustrating, especially for the creative pioneer, because they're more logical and rational, and they've thought through things, and they're going, you're really exaggerating this. This is not exactly how it went down. Yes?
Something that I've noticed that you've been putting in there is that when people appear, and because it's not saying when people dismiss, it's when people appear to dismiss. So it might not be that they are dismissing your ideas, but just like the appearance of it.
Yes, so insightful, Maria, because here's the reality. If we can start thinking more before I jump to conclusions and assume things about how people are feeling, I need to ask them if that's actually what they mean. Because especially, and I would say this is especially true about connectors, we jump to conclusions and think people are not for us. And that's why connectors take things so personally. And actually people are going, it's not personal, like it really isn't. Like their idea was better than yours. So that's why I say appear, because I would encourage you when you're trying to navigate things in community to test your assumptions. Is it true? Like, is the way that I'm feeling inside, is it true with the person that I'm dealing with? All right, the creative connector. Any other thoughts that way? Some of these are going to be very similar. Was there a creative connector? Do we have creative connectors? Yeah. Any other ones that are maybe feel a little different for the creative connector?
I can speak for some of them. They don't want to talk.
Yeah, go for it.
When people take it personal.
Yes. When people take things personally. Yep. Very much so. You'll see a lot of these are going to be the same. Actually, I'll just go through these and I'll point out. Values that you hold dear are being ignored or trampled on. So again, creative connectors, they're more based, rather than out of logic and reasoning, they make a lot of decisions based off people and values. So creative connectors really highly stand with values. They have values that the organization has stood by. This is what we've said. This is what we're actually shooting for. So when they're imagining the future, they're really taking those values into consideration. And when people ignore or trample on the values, that's really frustrating for creative feelers. People you feel responsible for are being treated badly. So this one is a little bit different for a creative connector. Because they feel for the people. So when people that they love and care for are being treated badly by others, similar to a nurturer that way, a creative connector can get triggered. And then when someone breaks a promise to you, because integrity is really important to creatives. And so if someone says something and promises something, you mentioned this, and then they break that promise, that can really trigger a creative connector and creative pioneer, both of them. All right, what triggers the nurturers? I know it's hard. Nurturers, you can do this. Safe space. Is there anything that triggers you, that causes you to withhold care? Yes?
We said kind of like you feel like we're being taken advantage of.
Oh, man.
You're behind the scenes and you're doing everything. And so like when people expect that of you, and like but it's never like a one-time thing. It's always a build-up.
Mm-hmm.
Constantly behind the scenes doing stuff and people aren't appreciating it.
Yes.
I mean that kind of lifts up, so taking advantage of, being ignored, things like that. Really.
So good. We need to appreciate and value our nurturers, and when nurturers feel like, because they will work really hard, often behind the scenes, to do the things that nobody else wants to do, but they will care well for us, they'll take care of it, but when it goes on, and they're never validated or appreciated for the contribution they're making, that can really trigger a nurturer. Now, for some of our voices, we don't understand this. Nurturers aren't saying that they want us to bring them up on stage in front of everybody and go, hey, we want to celebrate our nurturer. Thank you. Here's an award. Everybody stand up and give a clap. Would you want to say anything to everybody? That's not what nurturers are saying. Nurturers, they don't need that. Nurturers just need somebody who actually, specifically somebody that's probably leading, to come alongside and say, thank you so much. Like, I know how much work you put into this, and it means so much to me. We wouldn't have been able to do this without you. That's all a nurturer needs. They are so content. They just want it to be acknowledged, the work that they put in, and the contribution that they're making. Any others? Nurturers? Any other triggers? Yeah.
Yeah, just
Yes. Yes. Because you care for the people around you. Even if they're not even your closest friends, people, you just care for your people. And if someone is hurting somebody else, a nurturers, they can't help it. Their alarms are going off. Like they can read nonverbals, right? They are the most emotionally intelligent of all of the voices. So they can read people better than any of the rest of us. So they know when somebody said something that hurt somebody, and this person doesn't even know they hurt them, but you do, and it happens over and over again. A nurture will really, they're going to start withdrawing care because that weapon system's going to come out.
Like when a situation is super loud or overwhelming and like everyone just kind of like when we were doing the Zoom meeting, like shouting over each other, but then you have a good idea, but like no one can really hear it.
Yes, exactly. I love that you brought that up. Because nurturers they appreciate harmony. Like we work better when we have harmony. When we can all work together and when everybody's voices are valued, like that's how community is supposed to work. And when it doesn't work that way, that's really frustrating for a nurturer. Especially in situations where, and this happens a lot in the church, we talk about the way that we should be leading in community, we talk about things, but we don't actually live it out that way. And so when that happens over and over again, nurturers kind of go, this is like, we're kind of hypocrites. We say we are supposed to be living a certain way, but we actually don't create space for everyone. Again, we talked about this at the beginning. What if everybody's voice was heard? How would it change our communities? That's really good, you guys. Nurturers, you feel taken for granted. So first one you brought up. When nurturers feel taken for granted, it can trigger them. When you're not heard, so when nurturers don't have an opportunity to because nurturers think they actually have really good thoughts, feelings. It may not be that rational, logical like a guardian, but they have the best read on the room. They know how a decision will affect the group better than anyone else. So when their perspective is not brought into the room, that can be really frustrating when they're not heard. When your values are being ignored, so nurturers have a deep sense of value and those values are being ignored, can trigger the nurturer. When people you care about are being treated unfairly, so we talked about this too, when you see somebody that's picking on someone, when they're hurting someone intentionally, it's happening over and over again, triggers the nurturer, and the nurturer starts withdrawing care from that specific person. So, and nobody else probably even notices, but that person can feel it. They're like, how come I feel like you're treating me differently than you did. What happened? That's exactly what's going on. My son's shooting fireworks off outside. All right, so that's the triggers for our weapon system. So you kind of went through that. There's so much more that we can dive into. I would love to spend a lot more time. I'm just going to show, hopefully he won't keep doing those outside the classroom while he's having fun. All right, so the personal development plan, I would encourage you, if you have time to kind of really keep thinking through some of these things. If you want to do more work in Five Voices, one, I'm going to give you my email afterwards. You're always willing to ask me questions, but there's a lot more detail around how Five Voices works. There's actually a book called Five Voices that really goes into detail about a lot of these things. Oh my goodness. And it's, I'm not going to go out there and get him. He's having a good time. All right, so try to, if you have a chance, if this is interesting to you, there's a lot more to learn about this, pour into it. I'm going to show you one more slide. So this is, again, I've talked about the idea, nurturers, connectors, and creatives at the top. When they make decisions, their decision making is based off of people and values, right? So we'll know that nurturers, connectors, and creative connectors, when we make decisions, we primarily, our instinct is to make our decision really based off of people and values. Our decision making for guardians, pioneers, and creative pioneers is systems and logic. They like things systematized, and it needs to be rational, it needs to be logical. They tend to go there first. That's how they operate. Their processing and how they process the world, nurturers and guardians are present-oriented. So they actually think about the present, and they're like, what's happening right now? How's everybody doing? Like, I can feel where we're at in this moment. Connectors, creatives, and pioneers, their processing is future-oriented. So they're always thinking about the future. They're always thinking about what's next. I'm a connector, creative, pioneer, so those are my first three voices, which is why I tend to procrastinate a lot, because I'm already thinking about the next thing, and then all of a sudden something in the moment, in the present, it's like, oh, I needed to get that done. okay, I guess I'll scramble and I'll try to get this finished and I'll stay up till 2 in the morning trying to finish this thing that my decision, what's the Experiencing God book? I've got to get this done. I waited till the last second because I had too many things that I was thinking about and I got involved in and I was doing, and I wasn't thinking about the present things that I needed to accomplish. And so the way that we process and the way that we look at things, again, connectors, creatives, and pioneers, future-oriented, nurtures, guardians, present-oriented. When you see this cross-section, you guys have this in your books, this is what we would call your nemesis voice. So the people that you probably have the most conflict with or just have a harder time reading each other and connecting sometimes is the person that's opposite. So for nurturers, typically your nemesis voice is often your pioneer or your creative pioneer. And that's because pioneers tend to be a lot more forceful. Again, loudest voice, quietest voice, right? So sometimes it's just hard because you don't feel heard by the pioneers. And pioneers sometimes go, yeah, the nurturers are always slowing the process down. And they care so much about people's feelings. Like the nurturers are always talking about how this makes people feel. And if we make that decision, it's going to hurt people. And it's like, man, why do they have to slow the process down so much? So sometimes that's what we would call our nemesis voice. Opposite, guardians and guardians, your nemesis voice is often the connector or the creative connector. Because guardians are very logical, rational, they're in the moment. And connectors, they just want to have fun. They're out there, let's just do this thing. And it's like, we can't do that. It doesn't make sense. So sometimes they don't see each other in the right way, and they can kind of have conflict that way. Does that make sense to a lot of you? Do you feel some of that? No, maybe? I wish we could dive into it a little bit more, but we don't have time. I'll show you one last slide. So this is an example to show you. A pioneer, creative, and connected that's future-oriented. If the vision is compelling, we will find a way, right? It's like there's no bridge there. They're just like, we're going to figure it out. Let's go. We're going to figure out how to do this. Guardians and nurturers are present-oriented. The vision may be compelling, but without a bridge, I'm not coming. Like, I need a bridge. Like, you guys are all talking about we need to be on the other side, and you keep talking about how awesome it is over there, but you guys are going to try to jump this cliff. Like, I need a bridge to get over there, and I can be stubborn if I need to. I'm not going unless there's a bridge. Does that make sense? Does that resonate a little bit? Okay, I'm seeing some head nods. That's good. All right. So this is the 5 voices. I just want you to try to remember the power of your voice and appreciate who God made you to be. Now, your first voice, you have all of the voices. So it's not just your first voice that interacts, but the others tend to interact. It's like a filter. They tend to interact with your first voice. Learn to appreciate the other voice in the room. One of the best things I wish we would have had time to do this is we just don't. This is like I do this workshop for businesses, and it takes us 10 hours. But I have you interview your nemesis voice. So I have the voices sit together, and then they interview each other. And it's very fascinating to see the dynamics that come out in that. So really value the voices and try to understand the other perspectives of other people, because it's amazing the things that you can learn. Weapon systems that we use if we're not careful with them, we need to learn, pioneers, learn to put your safety on. Like, put that safety on. Because if it's not on, sometimes you shoot that thing and as soon as you pulled that trigger, it's like, oops, I did it again. And now I just created more of a problem. We need to learn to figure out how to put the safeties on our weapon systems so that we can hold back, so that when we feel that moment when we're about to use it, we go, wait, this is going to hurt our community. This is going to hurt the people that I care about. I want to hold back. Let's have an honest conversation. Can I try to learn their perspective? Again, the whole idea of peering. Weapon systems always diminish the relational harmony, relationships. They diminish trust, and they diminish the community to function at its best. So we want our communities to function at best. If we are the church, which I believe we are, as a pastor, this is one of my most frustrating things that people would say to me, is they'd say, what is the church going to do about this? You know what my response always was? Yeah, what are we going to do about this? Just because I'm the pastor here doesn't mean that you're not. The church is us. We are the church. It's not the pastor. It's not just the staff. And so as a community that is the church, Jesus has called us his people to be the church. We need to learn to work together. We need to learn to operate together, because if we are going to truly love our neighbor and love those people that need Jesus the most, we have to be able, if they look at us and they go, I don't want to be a part of that, that just looks dysfunctional. People are angry with each other. There's a lot of anxiety. That doesn't look any different than the world that I live in. We want to model to people what it looks like to live healthy lives, that we are loving each other well, just as God has called us to, because that is how we really present the gospel to people. Okay, we're going to change gears really quick. Thank you for being patient with me through that. I want to step into this next space. I wanted to read, we were going to do space at the table. I don't know if any of you had a chance to read that essay. I would guess I forgot to remind you yesterday, so we're not going to have a discussion about it. We don't have time anyway. But I would encourage you to read that Parker Palmer essay, because it's beautiful and it really gives this picture around what does it mean to live in community together. And it talks about two archetypes. It talks about creation and the Garden of Eden and how God created at the beginning. It talks about in Revelation, what does the New Jerusalem look like? And in the middle of that, because we can't really identify with what it would be like in a perfect place like the Garden of Eden, and we can't really identify with the New Jerusalem and what that's going to look like, because that's not the life we exist in right now. And so he really talks about what did it look like to be at the table with Jesus, and what was it like for him to work with the disciples as a man, and the frustration that Jesus probably felt. But he stayed at the table with them. He stays at the table with us in our messiness, and he keeps passing the bread, pouring the wine. He keeps giving of himself in order for us to be changed. And so I really encourage you to read that. Maybe take some time, go on a walk with someone and say, hey, this is something that I learned through reading that. I really encourage you to do that. That would be great. Can we start our break a little bit earlier today so that I have a little more time to do our next session? Would that be all right? So let's take 10 minutes now. Please be back at 10 till, because we have a lot to cover in our next session. I'm really excited to talk through the next piece.